The scent of pine and frost lingered in the air as I trudged through the snow-heavy forest, my breath forming small clouds before me. Winter had arrived early, harsh and unrelenting, much like the life I led. The bundle in my arms whimpered softly, and I tightened the worn blanket around his tiny body, trying to shield him from the biting wind cutting through my threadbare coat. "Shh, little one," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the howling wind. "We'll find warmth soon." Behind me, the village lights grew dimmer with each step I took deeper into the thick woods. I never really belonged there. As an Omega without a pack, without protection, I was invisible at best, a target at worst. The child I carried wasn't mine by birth, but I had chosen him. When I found him abandoned 3 days ago, his small body trembling in the underbrush. He was different. One leg twisted unnaturally, one arm smaller than the other. A Lycan pup, disabled and unwanted. In their world, strength meant survival. Weakness meant death. I knew that all too well. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind as I moved cautiously through the treacherous path. Kindness in a cruel world isn't weakness, Sorrel. It's the greatest form of rebellion. The silver pendant she had given me, a howling wolf with amber eyes, hung against my skin, warming me despite the cold. My fingers brushed over it for strength. As I ventured deeper into Lycan territory, I understood the risks. Humans rarely cross these borders, especially not Omegas like me. Sensitive to energies, attuned to emotions, we were seen as useful only to serve others, never as protectors of Lycan children. But this pup needed care I couldn't provide back in the village, where suspicions had already begun to grow. The trees closed in around me, blocking the weak moonlight filtering through the clouds. A strange stillness filled the air, and the pup in my arms grew quiet, sensing the change. I halted, realizing I was being watched. My heart pounded as I slowly turned, scanning the dark woods. A pair of golden eyes gleamed in the shadows, unblinking and predatory. Not human, not animal. Something in between. A Lycan. Time seemed to freeze as those eyes locked with mine. I didn't run. I couldn't. Not with the child in my arms. Instead, I pulled him closer, my body instinctively curving around him. "I mean, no harm," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "I'm just passing through." A low growl rumbled in response, vibrating through the clearing like distant thunder. The sound settled deep in my chest, primal and ancient. Then movement, a shadow separating itself from the darkness, taking shape as it approached. He stepped into the moonlight, and my breath caught. Nearly 7 feet tall, his muscular body was a seamless blend of man and wolf, broad shoulders, tapering into a narrow waist covered in midnight black fur that gleamed with vitality. His face was more human than wolf, but with sharp, elongated features, a predator's face. Those golden eyes, intelligent and calculating, assessed me coldly. I'd heard stories of the Lycan king, ruthless and uncompromising leader who had united the warring packs with force and fear. His dark fur, streaked with silver, marked him as the alpha among alphas. And I, a mere human Omega, stood in his territory, holding what I now realize with growing horror must be one of his own. The pup whimpered again, squirming in my arms. The sound drew the Lycan king's attention, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. Something in his expression shifted. Surprise, he murmured, followed by recognition. Then something darker, something I couldn't name. "That child," he said, his voice deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Where did you get him?" I had no choice but to tell the truth. "I found him abandoned at the edge of the forest 3 days ago. He was alone, freezing. I couldn't leave him there." The king moved closer, his steps deliberate. I held my ground despite the fear flooding my chest. "Show me," he commanded. With trembling hands, I pulled back the edge of the blanket, revealing the pup's face. His golden eyes blinked up at the night sky, delicate features, beautiful despite the slight asymmetry of his jaw. When the blanket shifted further, exposing his malformed limbs, I heard the king's sharp intake of breath. He was left to die, the king stated, his voice heavy with a grim truth. Yes, I answered, swallowing hard. I was taking him deeper into your territory, hoping to find someone who might know how to care for him properly. I've done what I can, but he needs more than I can give. The king's eyes narrowed as he studied me with renewed intensity. You crossed into dangerous territory, human, for a child that's not your own. A damaged child from your enemy's kind. He's not my enemy, I said, quietly looking down at the pup. He's just a child who deserves a chance to live. Something indecipherable flickered across the king's face. He suddenly reached out and I flinched, bracing for violence. Instead, his clawed finger traced the silver pendant around my neck. Where did you get this? He demanded. My grandmother, I replied. It was hers. Your grandmother, he repeated, stepping back. What was her name? Ira? I answered, confusion threading through my fear. Ira Bennett. The name seemed to strike him like a blow. He took a step back, reassessing me with those penetrating eyes. Come, he said abruptly, turning away. The child will die in this cold, and you along with him. When I hesitated, he looked over his shoulder. Impatience clear in his posture. Unless you prefer to freeze, Omega. I gripped the pup tighter and stepped forward. Where are you taking us? To warmth, to safety. His lips curved slightly, either in a smile or a snarl. For now, he replied. His voice carried a subtle threat, but I had no choice. The pup needed shelter, and we were deep in Lycan territory with night closing in fast. I followed the king through the trees, struggling to keep pace with his long strides. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, though it might have been minutes. Time felt fluid in the heavy quiet of the snow-covered forest. Occasionally, the king glanced back, his expression unreadable. Once, when I stumbled on a hidden root, he was beside me, instantly one hand steadying my elbow. His touch burned through the thin fabric of my coat, and he quickly withdrew, as if the contact disturbed him as much as it did me. The forest began to thin, giving way to a clearing. My eyes widened as a massive structure came into view. Not the primitive den I had expected, but a sprawling stone fortress rising from the mountainside as though it had grown there naturally. Lights glowed from numerous windows and smoke curled up from several chimneys. Your castle, I murmured, astonished. My pack's home, he corrected, guiding me toward a side entrance rather than the intimidating main doors. We slipped inside through a heavy wooden door, and warmth immediately surrounded us. The pup in my arms shifted his tiny face, relaxing as the heat began to soothe him. I felt my own tense muscles start to loosen, my fingers and toes tingling painfully as circulation returned. The corridors we passed through were unexpectedly elegant. Stone walls were adorned with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and ancient battles. The floors were covered with rich, colorful rugs that muffled our footsteps. We passed only a few others, but those we did encounter stopped and stared, their expressions varying from shock to outright hostility. The king ignored them all, and none dared to address him directly. Finally, he led me into a large chamber dominated by a roaring fireplace. The room was comfortably furnished with bookshelves lining one wall and large windows now shuttered against the cold along another. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to a chair near the fire. I obeyed, sinking gratefully into the cushioned seat. The pup squirmed in my arms, making small content noises at the warmth. The king watched us, standing rigidly, his hands clasped behind his back in the firelight. I could see him clearly now. His features were sharp, yet strangely beautiful. High cheekbones, a strong jaw covered with stubble, and a straight nose that might have been broken once. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, silver against his sun-kissed skin. He looked younger than I initially thought, perhaps in his 30s, though I knew Lycans aged differently than humans. Why didn't you leave him to his fate? He asked suddenly. Most humans would have. Most perhaps, not me. I met his gaze steadily. Would you have preferred that I had... His eyes narrowed. What I prefer is irrelevance. I'm curious about your motivation. I looked down at the pup now, peacefully asleep in the warmth, his chest rising and falling with each breath. I don't need a reason to help a child. In my experience, he moved closer, his presence looming over me. Humans always have reasons, especially when dealing with our kind. He leaned in. What do you want in return? Protection. Status gold. Nothing. The words slipped out, sharper than I intended. I want nothing from you, or your kind. I only wanted to find someone who could care for him properly, before returning to my own life. Your own life? He repeated with skepticism, his tone piercing. And what life is that, Omega? I smell no alpha's claim on you. No pack. You're alone. The truth in his words stung more than I cared to admit. I manage, barely. His gaze swept over my worn clothes, lingering on the frayed sleeves and patched boots. I lifted my chin. Not all of us need luxury to survive, Your Majesty. The title came out with a hint of defiance, and his bark of laughter surprised me. The sound softened his hard features, making him seem almost approachable. You have spirit for one so fragile, he said, amusement still coloring his voice. Tell me your name, Omega. Elilenar, I replied. Elilenar Bennett. Elilenar. He tested the name, rolling it on his tongue like a foreign taste. I am Kaelen. He offered no title, no family name. Not that he needed to. Everyone in these parts knew of Kaelen, the Lycan king, who had united the warring packs through force and fear. A knock at the door interrupted us. Enter. Kaelen called. A female Lycan appeared, her posture respectful, but not subservient. You summoned a healer, my king? She asked, her eyes flicking to me and the bundle in my arms. Yes, this child requires examination. He gestured toward us. And provide proper attire for our guest. She'll be staying. I froze at that. I never agreed to. You crossed into my territory carrying a Lycan child. You'll stay until I determine your true intentions. His tone brooked no argument. Consider yourself fortunate that my curiosity outweighs my suspicion for now. The female Lycan approached cautiously, her brown eyes warm, despite her obvious confusion. May I? She asked, holding out her arms for the pup. Reluctantly, I handed him over, immediately feeling the loss of his warmth against my chest. She cradled him, expertly pulling back the blanket to examine him more thoroughly. He's malnourished, she said, frowning. In these deformities, he would have been considered unfit by traditional law. Traditional law, Kaelen repeated, his expression darkening. A practice I've been trying to change for years. This surprised me. Everything I'd heard about the Lycan king suggested ruthless dominance, not compassion for the weak. The healer continued her examination, gently manipulating the pup's limbs. The leg could be straightened with proper binding. The arm, she hesitated, is more complicated, but not beyond help. Do what you can, Kaelen instructed, and prepare the adjoining chamber for our guest. Yes, my king. The healer bowed, still holding the pup. I'll take good care of him, I promise. As she turned to leave, panic surged in my chest. Wait! I stood quickly, dizzy from the sudden movement. Kaelen caught my arm as I swayed, steadying me with that same burning touch. The child will be returned to you once he's been treated, he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. You have my word. The healer left with the pup, leaving me alone with Kaelen. His hand still gripped my arm, the heat of his touch seeping through my thin sleeve. When I glanced down at the contact, he released me abruptly, as if suddenly aware of the impropriety. You need rest, he said, stepping back to restore the space between us. And food, he added. At the mention of food, my stomach growled loudly. I hadn't eaten since the morning, just a meager breakfast of stale bread that I'd shared with the pup. Heat rushed to my face in embarrassment. Kaelen's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. He moved toward a cord hanging near the fireplace and pulled it once. Within moments, a young male Lycan appeared. "Bring food for our guest," Kaelen ordered. The Lycan nodded and disappeared, leaving us again in uncomfortable silence. Kaelen gestured for me to sit, then took the chair opposite mine. The firelight danced across his sharp features, casting a golden glow over his eyes. "Your grandmother," he said suddenly. "Allie Bennett. She lived near the old crossroads in a cottage with blue shutters." I stared at him in astonishment. "Yes, how did you—" "She healed one of my packmates once, many years ago, a female who had been attacked by hunters." His gaze drifted toward the fire. "When others refused to help, your grandmother took her in and tended to her wounds." The revelation stunned me. My grandmother had never mentioned helping a Lycan, though she had taught me much about healing. She had been the healer of the village, before me respected, but also feared for her knowledge and her willingness to treat those others turned away. "The pendant you wear," Kaelen continued. "It was a gift from that woman, a token of gratitude." My fingers instinctively brushed the silver wolf at my throat. She had never told me. The alliance between humans and Lycans was even more fragile back then. Perhaps she thought it safer to stay silent. His eyes met mine again. "She passed her compassion to you." Before I could respond, the door opened and a young Lycan entered, carrying a tray laden with food, steaming soup, fresh bread, cheese, and what looked like roasted venison. My mouth watered at the sight. "Leave it," Kaelen ordered, and the servant set the tray on a small table near my chair, before leaving with a curious glance. "Eat." The king said, his voice softer than I expected. Though it was clearly a command, his tone had lightened. I didn't need to be told twice. I eagerly dug into the food, almost embarrassed by how hungry I was. The soup was rich with herbs and vegetables. The bread still warm from the oven, the meat tender and perfectly seasoned. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten so well. Kaelen watched me, his face unreadable. When I was nearly finished, he spoke again. "The pup you found, do you know which pack he belongs to?" I swallowed a bite of bread and shook my head. "No, I only know he was alone at the edge of the forest near the western village boundary." "Western," Kaelen repeated, his brow furrowing. "The Stone Ridge pack controls that territory." He fell silent, thinking. "Will you return him to them?" I asked hesitantly. His golden eyes flashed. "They left him to die. He will not be returned." The vehemence in his voice startled me. "Then what will happen to him?" "He'll remain here under my protection," Kaelen said, his gaze steady. "As will you, until we determine who is responsible for abandoning a pup against pack law." "I can't stay," I protested. "I have responsibilities in the village people who need my healing skills." "And yet," he said knowingly, "you were leaving when I found you weren't you. Carrying the pup deeper into Lycan territory away from your village." I looked down at my empty plate. They were growing suspicious. Hostile humans caring for a Lycan child. The memory of whispered accusations still felt fresh. "So you were cast out," Kaelen concluded, "as was the pup. 2 unwanted strays." The words stung even though they were true. "I wasn't cast out. I chose to leave before things escalated." Kaelen leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Listen carefully, Sorrel Hawke. You're now involved in Lycan politics, whether you wish it or not. The abandonment of a pup, especially one with royal bloodlines, is a serious offense." My heart stuttered. "Royal bloodlines," I repeated. Kaelen's gaze hardened. The markings on his left shoulder, the 3 silver crescent moons. They indicate he is born of the royal line. The implications hit me like a wave. "He's your son." "No," Kaelen said sharply. but my blood nonetheless, a nephew perhaps, or a cousin, several times removed. The royal bloodline runs through several branches of the pack. Relief washed over me quickly, followed by confusion at my own reaction. What did it matter to me whether the pup was his son or not? Abandoning him was not only cruel, but treasonous. Kaelen continued. I need to know who is responsible, and I can help you with that. How exactly? I asked, setting my now empty plate aside. You found him. You may have seen something, heard something. Kaelen rose from his chair and began pacing his movements, graceful predator-like. And you bear my grandmother's pendant. It's a sign I cannot ignore. A sign of what? Kaelen stopped and fixed me with that intense, golden stare. That's what I intend to discover. Before I could respond, the door opened again. The healer returned her arms, now empty of the pup. Anxiety flooded me. He's resting comfortably, she said, anticipating my worry. I've set his leg and applied healing salve to his skin. He's been fed and is sleeping peacefully. Can I see him? I asked. The healer glanced at Kaelen, who nodded once. Show her, he instructed. The healer led me through a door I hadn't noticed before into a smaller, cozy room. A crackling fire provided warmth and soft light. In a small bed near the fire lay the pup, swaddled in clean blankets. His injured leg was carefully splinted, and his tiny face appeared peaceful in sleep. Relief surged through me as I saw him breathing steadily, his color returning. Thank you, I said to the healer. She smiled, her brown eyes warm. You've done well with him, considering your limited resources, she said. He would have died without your care. I noted how the pup's arm was positioned carefully at his side. What's wrong with his arm? The bones didn't form properly before birth, she explained. It's not uncommon, but usually... She hesitated. Usually such pups are culled. Kaelen's voice came from the doorway. He entered his massive frame, making the room feel smaller. An old practice, he said, his tone dark, born of hard times when the packs couldn't afford to care for those who might not survive. But he will survive, I said, anger rising in my chest. He's strong in every way that matters. Yes, Kaelen agreed, surprising me. He is. He approached the bed, looking down at the sleeping pup with an expression I couldn't quite identify, something between sorrow and determination. With a tenderness I hadn't expected, Kaelen brushed a finger along the pup's cheek. Leave us, he said to the healer, who bowed and withdrew quietly. You care for him, I observed, even though you just met him. He is pack, Kaelen said simply, and he has been wronged. He turned his golden eyes on me, as have you, it seems. I shook my head. I'm fine. Are you? He asked, stepping closer. I caught his scent, pine smoke and something wild. An omega alone cast out by your village, carrying the burden of another's child. I wasn't cast out, I insisted again, and he's not a burden. No, Kaelen agreed, his gaze returning to the pup. Not a burden, a blessing, perhaps one that led you to my territory, wearing the pendant of a woman my pack once owed a debt. I grew uneasy. What are you suggesting? I don't believe in coincidences, Sorrel Hawke. He said my name with careful precision, as if testing each syllable. You appear at my borders with a royal pup and a woman's pendant at a time when dissent grows within the packs. The old ways clash with the new. Some believe I've grown too. He hesitated. Progressive in my rule. Progressive? I asked, surprised. A humorless smile curved his lips. Did you think me a complete tyrant? I earned my reputation through necessary violence. Yes, the packs needed unification, needed a strong hand, but strength without compassion breeds only resentment and rebellion. He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to reveal the night beyond. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. "I've been working to change the old laws," he continued. "The culling of disabled pups, the subjugation of omegas, the isolation from human settlements." Kaelen let the curtain fall back into place. "Not everyone agrees with these changes." "And you think the abandonment of this pup is related to that disagreement?" I asked slowly, piecing it together. "A message, perhaps, or a test of my resolve." His voice lowered to a growl. "Either way, it will not stand." The pup stirred in his sleep, making a small, stressed sound. Without thinking, I reached out to soothe him, gently stroking his soft hair. He settled immediately, leaning into my touch. "He trusts you," Kaelen observed. "We've been through a lot together these past few days." "Yes." He watched my hand as it continued its gentle motion. "The healer tells me you've been giving him herbs for pain. Knowledge few humans possess." "My grandmother taught me," I explained softly before she passed. "Another gift from Ira," Kaelen murmured. "Then more firmly you'll stay here while he heals, both for your safety and to help us identify those responsible for his abandonment." It wasn't a request. "And if I refuse?" His eyes met mine, challenging. "Do you wish to refuse and return to a village that shunned you, to face the winter alone?" The truth was, I didn't. The warmth of the castle, the security it offered, the care given to the pup, it was more than I could provide on my own. But submission had never come easily, even when it was in my best interest. "I'll stay," I said, finally. "For him. But I'm not your prisoner." "No," Kaelen agreed, his expression softening fractionally. "Not a prisoner, a guest." The weight of those words hung in the air between us. Personal protection from the Lycan king was no small thing. "Rest now," he said, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow will bring many questions, and you'll need your strength." As he reached the threshold, I called after him. "Kaelen." He paused, looking back, surprise evident in his features, perhaps, at my boldness in using his name without a title. "Thank you," I said simply, "for helping him." Something flickered in his golden eyes, an emotion I couldn't name. Then he nodded once and was gone, leaving me alone with the sleeping pup and a growing sense that my life had changed irrevocably. I woke to sunlight streaming through a gap in the heavy curtains and the unfamiliar sensation of sleeping on something other than my thin straw mattress. For a moment, disorientation gripped me. The soft bed, the warm blankets, the stone walls house hung with tapestries. Then memory rushed back. The Lycan king, the castle, the pup. I bolted upright, immediately searching for the small bed near the fire. Empty. Panic surged through me as I threw back the covers and stood still, dressed in yesterday's clothes, though someone had removed my boots. The door to my chamber opened before I could reach it, and the female healer from the previous night entered, carrying a tray. "Good morning," she said, her tone friendly. "The little one is fine. He's being bathed and fed. I thought you might want breakfast." And relief washed over me, followed by embarrassment at my reaction. "Thank you." I managed, running a hand through my tangled blonde hair. "I'm sorry, You were worried." She finished for me, setting the tray on a small table. "It's natural. You've been his sole protector for days." She gestured to the tray, which held breadfruit and a steaming mug that smelled of herbs and honey. "Eat. Then I've brought fresh clothes for you, and there's water for washing through there. Must it?" She pointed to another door I hadn't noticed the night before. "That's very kind," I said, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must look and smell after days of traveling through the forest. "I don't know your name." "Mara," she replied, a smile transforming her serious face. "And you're Sorrel, the human healer who saved our king's kin. The whole castle is talking about you." I nearly choked on the piece of bread I'd just bitten into. "Talking about me? We don't get many human visitors." Mara said, a twinkle in her brown eyes. "Certainly not ones who arrive carrying royal pups and wearing ancient tokens of alliance." Ancient tokens. I touched the wolf pendant at my throat. That symbol hasn't been given to a human in over a century, she explained. It marks you as a friend of the pack. Before I could ask more, another knock came at the door. Mara opened it to reveal a tall, imposing female Lycan with striking silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe braid. The king requests her presence in the great hall, once she's presentable, the newcomer said to Mara without acknowledging me directly. Her voice clipped, her manner cold. Of course, Vera, Mara replied, her demeanor becoming more formal. I'll see to it. The female gave me a quick, assessing glance, her lip curling slightly before she turned and strode away. Don't mind her, Mara said once the door closed. Vera is the king's head advisor. She's traditional. I understood the implication. She doesn't approve of humans in the castle. She doesn't approve of many things, Mara said diplomatically. Now hurry and eat. The king doesn't like to be kept waiting. After a quick breakfast and an even quicker wash with the basin of warm water provided, I donned the clothes Mara had brought, simple but well-made garments that fit surprisingly well. A pale blue dress of soft wool, warm stockings, and sturdy leather boots, an improvement over my worn ones. The pup? I asked as Mara helped me lace the dress. The king has him, she replied. He's been personally overseeing his care this morning. This surprised me. I'd imagined Kaelen delegating such a task to servants, not handling it himself. Mara led me through a maze of corridors, passing Lycans of various ranks and positions who stared openly at me, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. I kept my chin up, refusing to be intimidated, though my heart raced at the attention. The great hall lived up to its name, a vast chamber with soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams. A huge fireplace dominated one wall, large enough that I could have stood inside it. Windows of colored glass cast prisms of light across the stone floor, and long tables flanked a central aisle that led to a raised dais, where a single throne-like chair stood. Kaelen sat there, not lounging, but alert, his powerful frame radiating authority. The pup was indeed with him, cradled in one arm, while his free hand gestured as he spoke to a group of Lycans gathered before the dais. He looked different in daylight, still intimidating, but less menacing than he had seemed in the shadowed forest. He wore a simple black tunic that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, and his dark hair was pulled back, revealing the strong lines of his face. As we approached, the conversation halted, and all eyes turned to us. I fought the urge to shrink under the collective gaze of so many predators. Ah, our guest awakens, Kaelen said, his deep voice carrying easily through the hall. Come forward, Sorrel Hawke. Mara gave me a gentle nudge, and I walked down the central aisle alone, acutely aware of the whispers that followed me. When I reached the foot of the dais, I stopped, uncertain of the proper protocol. Good morning, Your Majesty, I said, choosing formality as the safest path. A flicker of amusement passed over Kaelen's face at my address. Did you rest well? He asked, shifting the pup in his arms. The little one seems better already. His colors improved, his eyes brighter, watching me with recognition. Yes, thank you, I replied, my gaze fixed on the pup. And he seems well. He's improving, Kaelen agreed, thanks to your initial care and Vera's healing skills. I was surprised by the public acknowledgement, and from the reactions of those around us, so were they. I've called you here because we've made a discovery. Kaelen continued, his tone turning serious. The pup has a birthmark, one that was hidden beneath the dirt when you found him. He turned the child slightly, revealing a small crescent-shaped mark at the base of his neck. This identifies his lineage precisely. He is the son of my cousin Thorn, who leads the Stone Ridge Pack. Murmurs spread through the gathered Lycans at this revelation. Thorn, who has reported no missing children, Kaelen added, his voice sharpening. Thorn, who has publicly opposed my reforms, regarding the treatment of disabled pack members. Now it all made sense why Kaelen had taken such a personal interest in the pup. This wasn't just about an abandoned child. This was pack politics, family politics. "The pup needs a name," Kaelen announced, looking down at him. "Until his father acknowledges him, which I will ensure happens, he falls under my protection and requires a proper identity." To my astonishment, Kaelen looked at me. "You found him, saved him. The honor should be yours." I blinked momentarily, speechless at being granted such a privilege. The Lycans around us shifted some muttering in disapproval. "My king," a voice spoke up. It was Vera stepping forward with a frown. "Surely such an honor belongs to a pack member, not a human." Kaelen responded firmly. She wore the wolf token, and she showed more loyalty to the pack than those who abandoned him. Vera's lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure, but she stepped back, knowing better than to challenge her king openly. I approached the dais, gazing down at the small face with golden eyes watching me. What name could possibly suit this resilient little soul who had survived against all odds? "Ethan," I said softly. "It means strong and enduring." Kaelen considered this, then nodded. "Ethan of the royal line," he proclaimed, "under my protection and the protection of Sorrel Hawke, who bears the wolf token." This declaration sent another ripple of whispers through the hall. I hadn't expected to be formally linked to the pup's protection, and judging by the reactions around me, neither had anyone else. "Now," Kaelen said, addressing the gathered Lycans, "I ride to Stone Ridge to speak with Thorn. In my absence, Sorrel and the pup will remain here under guard. They are to be treated with all respect due to guests under royal protection." He handed Ethan to me, our fingers brushing in the exchange. That same jolt of warmth shot through me, and from the slight narrowing of his eyes, I knew he felt it too. "Vera will serve as regent in my absence." Kaelen continued, breaking our gaze to address the hall. "I expect to return within 3 days." With that, he stood towering over me, from his position on the dais. "Walk with me," he said in a lower voice, meant only for my ears. I followed him as he strode from the hall, cradling Ethan against my chest. The pup snuggled closer, his small hands clutching at my dress. Once we were in a quieter corridor, Kaelen slowed his pace. "You've been given a position of significance," he said without preamble. "Not everyone will approve," I said dryly. "Your advisor Vera seems particularly displeased." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Vera disapproves of most things on principle, but she is loyal and capable." "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Link me publicly to Ethan's protection." Kaelen stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "Because you're already linked to him in all the ways that matter. You saved him when others would not. You carried him through hostile territory to find him help." His golden eyes held mine intently. "And because I need allies who value compassion over tradition." The admission surprised me. "You believe I'm such an ally." "I believe you could be," he said carefully. "The reforms I seek, ending the culling of disabled pups, improving relations with humans, creating a more just hierarchy within the packs. These things require support from unexpected quarters, including human omegas." I raised an eyebrow. "Especially those with healing skills and the courage to challenge conventions." His gaze dropped to Ethan, who had fallen asleep in my arms. "He will need an advocate when I confront Thorn, someone who can speak to his care with authority." "You want me to go with you?" I asked, alarmed at the thought of facing a hostile Lycan pack. "No, that would be too dangerous. But I need your knowledge, your observations of his condition when you found him." Kaelen's expression darkened. "I need evidence of neglect to force Thorn's acknowledgement and ensure the pup's place in the pack hierarchy." I nodded slowly now, understanding why my presence had been formalized. "I'll tell you everything I know." "Good." He resumed walking, leading me to a small study where maps were spread across a large table. This is Stone Ridge territory, Kaelen said, pointing to an area marked with a distinctive symbol. Thorn controls the western border that touches human lands. That's where I found Ethan, I confirmed. Just inside the human boundary. Kaelen's jaw tightened. As I suspected, left precisely where he might be found by humans, but far enough into Lycan territory that Thorn could claim no knowledge of it. A coward's abandonment, I said, to anger coloring my voice, not even giving him a clean death, just leaving his fate to chance. Exactly. Kaelen's eyes flashed with approval at my understanding. It speaks to calculation, not just cruelty. Will Thorn admit to it? I asked. No, but he will not be able to deny the evidence of his bloodline. Kaelen traced a finger along the map. I'll take a small force enough to show strength, but not to threaten war. I shifted Ethan in my arms, looking down at his peaceful face. What happens to him if Thorn acknowledges him? He returns to his birth pack, but under my direct protection and supervision. No harm will come to him. Kaelen's voice softened. And you would be welcome to visit him to continue overseeing his care. The thought of being separated from Ethan created an unexpected ache in my chest, but I pushed it aside. And if Thorn refuses, then Ethan remains here as my ward. Kaelen's eyes met mine. With you as his caretaker if you wish it. The offer stunned me. You would allow a human to raise a Lycan royal. A human who already proved her worth by saving him, Kaelen countered. Yes, there was something in his gaze I couldn't quite interpret, a kind of intensity that made me look away first. Seeking safer conversational ground, I said, I should prepare for your departure. Kaelen nodded, seeming to collect himself. Write down everything you observed about Drake's condition when you found him. Yes, I replied. I leave at midday. He reached out suddenly, his hand hovering near my face before he drew it back, as if second-guessing whatever gesture he'd intended. You'll be safe here, Kaelen said instead. Despite some initial weariness, my pack will honor my command to protect you. I'm not afraid, I told him, realizing with surprise that it was true. Despite being surrounded by predators in an unfamiliar place, I felt more secure here than I had in the village where I'd spent my entire life. No, Kaelen agreed, a hint of that almost smile playing at his lips again. You're not, are you? Perhaps that's why Drake trusts you. He senses your strength. With that curious compliment, he turned back to study the maps, effectively dismissing me. I left the study with Drake still asleep in my arms, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought me here. Under the protection of the fearsome Lycan king, who was proving to be far more complex than the stories had painted him. The next 3 days passed in an unexpected rhythm, caring for Drake and navigating the intricate social hierarchy of the castle while Kaelen was away. True to his word, I was treated with reluctant respect by most, though always with an undercurrent of suspicion. Vera proved to be a genuine ally, teaching me the basics of Lycan etiquette and explaining the intricacies of pack dynamics. The royal bloodline carries special abilities, she explained as we sat in the castle gardens, a sheltered courtyard where hardy winter plants still thrived under glass enclosures. Drake lay on a blanket between us, happily batting at colorful fabric toys that Vera had fashioned for him. What kind of abilities? I asked, adjusting the splint on Drake's leg, which was already showing remarkable improvement. Enhanced strength, even by Lycan standards, keener senses, she said. But most importantly, the ability to calm the feral nature of others. She nodded toward Drake, who was gurgling contentedly. Even damaged as he is, you can feel it in his presence, a soothing quality. I had noticed it the way my own anxieties seemed to quiet when I held him, the way even the most hostile Lycans softened slightly when they saw him. Is that why Kaelen is so determined to protect him for his abilities? Vera's expression grew serious. Partly, but there's more to it. Kaelen was once like Drake, born with a defect. This revelation stunned me. But he's so perfect. I said the words, slipping out before I could stop them, and heat rushed to my cheeks. Vera smiled knowingly. Yes, but as a pup, he had a malformed foot. His father, the old king, protected him against tradition and insisted he could still lead. When Kaelen was 10, a healer from the northern packs developed a treatment that corrected it, she continued. Her voice lowered. Not everyone has forgotten his origins. Some still whisper that he's unfit to rule because of that early weakness. That's absurd, I said, indignant on Kaelen's behalf. He unified warring packs, established peace through strength and force. Yes, Vera agreed. But now he seeks to change things through compassion and reform. Some see that as proof his defect weakened him. Compassion isn't weakness, I said firmly, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. No, Vera said, watching me with thoughtful eyes. But it's easier to rule through fear than love. Fear only requires occasional demonstrations of power. Love demands constant nurturing. Our conversation was interrupted by Thea's arrival in the garden, her severe presence immediately changing the atmosphere. A messenger has arrived, she announced. The king returns tonight with all of Thorn Blackridge of Stone Ridge. My heart leapt at the news of Kaelen's return, then immediately contracted at the mention of Thorn. Drake's father is coming here. Apparently Kaelen had been persuasive. Thea's tone suggested that persuasive might be an understatement. You are to prepare the child and yourself for a formal presentation in the Great Hall at dusk. With that, she turned and left, her posture rigid with disapproval. Vera helped me bathe and dress Drake in fine clothes that had been specially made for him. Tiny garments of soft leather and wool, embroidered with royal symbols. For myself, I was provided a dress of deep green, far more elegant than anything I'd ever worn, with silver embroidery, subtly echoing the pattern of my wolf pendant. You look like you belong here, Vera said as she helped arrange my hair, twisting the blonde strands into an intricate style adorned with small silver beads. I don't though, I replied, staring at my reflection in the polished silver mirror. No matter how they dress you. Vera's hands stilled on my shoulders. Don't be so certain. Kaelen sees something in you that matters to him. Before I could ask what she meant, another servant arrived to escort us to the Great Hall. The atmosphere was tense as we entered. The hall was packed with Lycans from both Kaelen's pack and presumably the Stone Ridge visitors. They parted to let us pass, whispers trailing behind us. I held Drake close, finding comfort in his presence against the scrutiny. Kaelen stood on the dais, looking travel-worn but commanding in dark leather and fur. Beside him was a Lycan I assumed to be Thorn Blackridge, a bit shorter but powerfully built, with the same golden eyes as Kaelen, though his hair was a lighter brown, streaked with premature silver. His face might have been handsome if not for the contemptuous curl of his lip. When our eyes met across the hall, his narrowed full of open hostility. I forced myself to continue forward, chin high, focusing instead on Kaelen, whose gaze held mine with unexpected warmth. Sorrel Hawke, he called as I approached the dais. Bring forth the child. I climbed the few steps, intensely aware of all eyes upon us. Drake, sensing the tension, whimpered softly, and I whispered reassurances as I presented him to the assembled Lycans. Behold Drake of the royal line, Kaelen proclaimed. Son of Thorn Blackridge, heir to Stone Ridge, abandoned at birth and rescued by a human healer who showed more compassion than his own kind. Thorn's face contorted with rage. I did not abandon him, he snarled. He was stolen from us. Lies, Kaelen replied calmly. Sorrel found him alone at the boundary of your territory, unfed, uncared for, left to the elements. And we're to take the word of a human, Thorn spat. She probably stole him herself. I stepped forward, anger overriding caution. I found him 3 days before meeting your king, half-starved and crying in the underbrush. If he was stolen, why wasn't an alarm raised? Why weren't search parties sent? Thorn bared his teeth at me, and I instinctively stepped back, clutching Drake closer. "You will not threaten her in my hall," Kaelen said, his voice dangerously soft. He moved to stand between us, a living barrier of muscle and authority. "The evidence is clear, cousin. The pup bears your bloodline's mark, yet you reported no missing child. He was abandoned because of his disabilities, in violation of my decree ending such practices." Thorn's gaze shifted to his son, taking in the splinted leg and smaller arm. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite remorse, but perhaps recognition. "What would you have me do?" Thorn asked Kaelen, his voice lower now, less confrontational. "Acknowledge him publicly as your son," Kaelen replied. "Grant him his rightful place in the Stone Ridge hierarchy with all privileges and protections of his bloodline." Thorn's jaw clenched as he considered this. "And if I refuse, then he remains here under my direct protection as my heir." Kaelen's statement caused a ripple of shock through the hall. Even I couldn't hide my surprise. This went far beyond what Kaelen had suggested before leaving. Thorn paled. "You would make him your heir to punish me." "I would make a worthy pup my heir, because he carries our bloodline and deserves his birthright," Kaelen corrected coldly. "His disabilities will heal with proper care. The true defect of character lies not in him, but in those who would abandon their own blood." The two Lycan alphas stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Thorn's shoulders slumped slightly. "I acknowledge him as my son." He said the words, dragged from him reluctantly. "But he cannot return to Stone Ridge yet. Not until he is stronger." "A convenient excuse," Kaelen said, his tone making it clear he saw through the ploy. "Very well. Drake will remain here for now under my protection and the care of Sorrel Hawke, who has proven her worth to the royal line." At this, Thorn's head snapped up. "A human caring for a Lycan royal, it's unseemly unnatural." "And yet she has done what you would not," Kaelen retorted. "She will continue as his caretaker with all the rights and privileges that entails." I stood frozen, realizing that Kaelen had just elevated my status far beyond what I had expected. From the murmurs spreading through the hall, it was clear that everyone else was equally shocked. "Do you accept this responsibility, Sorrel Hawke?" Kaelen asked, turning to me, his golden eyes intense. Looking down at Drake, who had curled his small hand around my finger, I knew there was only one answer I could give. "I do," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. "Then it is settled." Kaelen placed a hand on my shoulder, the weight and warmth of it sending that familiar current through my body. "Drake remains here acknowledged by his father, but under joint custody of the crown and his chosen caretaker." Thorn looked as if he might protest further, but a warning glance from Kaelen silenced him. With a stiff bow, Thorn stepped back, conceding the point, if not agreeing with it. "There will be a feast to celebrate Drake's formal acknowledgement," Kaelen announced to the gathered Lycans, "and to honor the alliance between our packs and the human healer who has earned her place among us." As the assembly dispersed to prepare for the feast, Kaelen led me and Drake to a small antechamber off the main hall. Once the door closed behind us, he seemed to relax slightly, some of the rigid formality leaving his posture. "You did well," he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. Standing up to Thorn took courage. "I was just defending Drake," I replied, adjusting the pup in my arms as he began to fuss. "May I?" Kaelen asked, holding out his hands. Somewhat surprised, I transferred Drake to him, watching as the powerful Lycan king cradled the small pup with practiced ease. Drake immediately quieted, reaching up to touch Kaelen's face with curious fingers. "He likes you," I observed. "We are kin," Kaelen said simply. Then his voice dropped lower. "As you and I are becoming." I looked up sharply, finding his golden eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "What do you mean?" "The position I've given you? Caretaker to a royal pup, it makes you part of the pack structure," he explained. "Not quite like him, but no longer merely human, something in between." And is that what you wanted? I asked suddenly, needing to understand his motives. Kaelen was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to Drake before returning to me. What I want, he said carefully, is changing, evolving. But yes, keeping you close is what I want. 6 months passed in a blur of new routines and unexpected joys. Spring arrived, melting the snow and bringing life back to the forest surrounding the castle. Drake grew stronger each day, his leg healing so well that he now crawled with surprising speed across any surface we set him on. His arm would always be smaller than the other, but Vera's exercises were increasing its strength and mobility beyond what anyone had thought possible. I had settled into a strange new life, not quite Lycan, not quite human as Kaelen had described it. The castle had become home, its stone walls familiar, its inhabitants gradually warming to my presence as they witnessed my devotion to Drake. Even Celise had softened somewhat, though she maintained a formal distance. Kaelen was complicated. His duties often took him away from the castle, mediating disputes between packs, enforcing his reforms across the territories. But when he returned, he always sought out Drake and me first, before even changing from his travel clothes. We had developed an easy companionship, spending evenings in his study where he would hold Drake while we discussed everything from pack politics to human literature. Sometimes I would catch him watching me with that same intense gaze I couldn't quite decipher, but he never pushed for more than friendship. Perhaps the divide between our worlds was too great, even with my unusual position in the pack. Or perhaps I was imagining the connection I felt whenever we were close. On this particular evening, I stood on the castle ramparts, watching the sunset paint the forest in shades of gold. Drake was asleep after a day of exciting developments. He had spoken his first word and pulled himself to standing for nearly a minute before tumbling back onto his cushioned play area. He's getting stronger. Kaelen's deep voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him approaching along the stone walkway. He looked weary but content, having returned that morning from a week-long journey to the northern packs. Yes, I agreed, smiling at the thought of our charge's progress. Vera thinks he might walk before his first birthday. A remarkable recovery, Kaelen said, coming to stand beside me at the parapet, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Though perhaps not so remarkable with you caring for him. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. It's a joint effort. Your healers, your protection, our protection, I corrected gently. You're as much his guardian as I am now. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Thorn has requested another visit, Kaelen said eventually. He's coming in a fortnight. My stomach tightened at the news. Thorn has visited twice since that first confrontation, each time assessing Drake with critical eyes, searching for progress while barely acknowledging me. Does he still talk about taking Drake back to Stone Ridge? He does. Kaelen's jaw tightened, but I've made it clear that won't happen until Drake is much older, if at all. The pup belongs here now, Kaelen said, his words heavy with unspoken implications. With us. The thought remained unspoken, but I heard it clearly nonetheless. There's something else, Kaelen continued, turning to face me fully. The dying sunlight caught in his eyes, making them gleam like molten gold. Delegations from all the major packs are gathering here next month for the summer solstice. It's a significant event, a celebration, I asked, noting the unusual hesitation in his voice. More than that, Kaelen replied. A confirmation of alliances, a renewal of vows to the crown. He paused, his tone lowering. And traditionally, it's when the king announces major decisions that will affect the kingdom. Something in his voice made my pulse quicken. What kind of decisions? Kaelen's eyes held mine, searching. The kind that change futures, establish new traditions. His hand moved to cover mine where it rested on the stone parapet. I wanted to ask you something, Sorrel. Before he could continue, hurried footsteps sounded on the stairs leading to the ramparts. Vera appeared, her expression unusually animated. "My king," she called. "Riders approach from the east. Stone Ridge colors, but not Alaric's standard. They claim urgency." Kaelen's expression hardened instantly, his earlier vulnerability replaced by the mask of a king. "I'll meet them in the Great Hall." He squeezed my hand once before releasing it. "We'll continue this conversation later." I followed them down to the Great Hall, my curiosity and concern growing about these unexpected visitors. By the time I arrived, 4 Lycans in Stone Ridge colors were already kneeling before Kaelen, who had taken his place on the throne. "Rise and speak," Kaelen commanded. "What brings you here with such haste?" The leader of the small group stood, her face grave. "My king, I am Terran, second to Alpha Thorn. I come bearing dire news. 3 days ago our pack was attacked by the River Clan rebels. They struck at night, targeting the main settlement." She swallowed hard. "Thorn was gravely wounded defending the pack. Before he lost consciousness, he named you guardian to his son and heir, and asked that you protect Stone Ridge in his absence." Murmurs spread through the hall as the Lycans gathered, drawn by the commotion. Kaelen remained still, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. "And Thorn's condition now gets?" he asked. "Stable but unconscious. Our healers are doing what they can." Terran's voice faltered. "But they are not optimistic, my king." Kaelen stood, his decision immediate. "Vera, prepare our forces. We ride to Stone Ridge, at first light." He turned to Terran. "You and your companions will rest here tonight. I'll need details of the attack, the rebels' movements, everything you know." As the hall erupted into activity, Kaelen caught my eye across the crowd and gave a small nod toward the side chamber where we had spoken. After Drake's acknowledgement ceremony, I made my way there, understanding he would join me when he could. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened, and Kaelen entered, his face etched with concern and determination. "I must go," he said without preamble. "Stone Ridge needs immediate reinforcement. And if Thorn dies," I completed for him. "A baby who can't even walk yet," I added. "Yes, which makes him and you targets." Kaelen ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "The River Clan rebels oppose everything I've worked for. The reforms, the alliance with humans, the protection of the disabled. They would see Drake's existence as an abomination, a weakness in the bloodline." Fear coiled in my stomach. "What do we do?" "You and Drake will come with me to Stone Ridge." Kaelen said, his decision clearly already made. "To the heart of the conflict?" I asked, alarmed. "To the heart of his birthright," Kaelen countered. "The pack needs to see him, to be reminded of what they're fighting for, and he'll be safer with me, with us, than anywhere else." The inclusion sent a surge of warmth through me, despite the circumstances. "When do we leave?" "At dawn." "Pack only what you need." His expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Sorrel. This isn't what I planned for tonight." "Life rarely goes according to plan," I said, thinking of how a small abandoned pet pup had changed the entire course of mine. "We'll be ready." The journey to Stone Ridge took 2 days, our party moving at remarkable speed, considering it included a full contingent of warriors and a baby. Drake seemed to thrive on the adventure, watching the changing landscape with wide golden eyes, unperturbed by the tension surrounding us. Stone Ridge itself was beautiful, a series of settlements built into and around massive rock formations that jutted from the earth like the spines of some giant beast. The main pack house was a sprawling structure of stone and timber that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. We were greeted with a mixture of relief and weariness. Relief at the arrival of their king, and his forces' weariness at the presence of a human in their midst. But none dared question Kaelen's decision to bring me. Not when I carried Drake in my arms, the living symbol of their wounded Alpha's bloodline. Thorn lay in a large chamber in the heart of the pack house, attended by healers who looked exhausted and grim. His normally powerful body seemed diminished against the furs. a massive bandage wrapped around his chest where I was told a poisoned blade had struck dangerously close to his heart. The poison resists our treatments, the head healer explained to Kaelen. It's something new, something the rebels must have acquired from outside our territories. I stepped closer to the bed, my healer's instincts responding to the challenge. May I asked, gesturing to the bandages. The Lycan healers looked to Kaelen, who nodded. Let her see. She has knowledge we may lack. Gently handing Drake to Vera, who had accompanied us, I approached Thorn's bedside. The wound beneath the bandages was angry and inflamed, strange black tendrils spreading outward from the entry point. I leaned closer, inhaling carefully, detecting an odor that triggered a memory. Nightshade and something else, I murmured, thinking back to my grandmother's lessons on poisons and their antidotes. Silver nitrate, perhaps mixed with a binding agent to slow the body's natural healing. Can you treat it? Kaelen asked, coming to stand beside me. I think so. I nodded slowly. I'd need specific herbs, some of which I brought with me, and clean water, preferably from a running stream rather than a well. Within hours, I was working alongside the Lycan healers, preparing poultices and tinctures for my supplies, combined with their native plants. The collaboration was unprecedented, human healing knowledge, merging with Lycan traditions, but necessity overcame prejudice. 3 days passed in an exhausting cycle of treatments, brief rest, and vigilant care. Thorn's fever spiked dangerously on the second night, and I stayed at his bedside applying cool cloths and administering the antidote I'd prepared. Rowan arrived in the early hours of the morning, holding Ethan in his arms, the boy peacefully asleep. You should rest, he murmured softly, watching me as I changed the bandages once more. So should you, I replied, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. Between coordinating the defense of Stone Ridge and checking on Alaric, he'd barely slept. I'm used to it, he said, settling into a chair next to the bed, adjusting Ethan against his chest. How is he? Rowan asked. The poison is receding, I replied, showing him the wound where the dark tendrils had started to fade. If he makes it through the night, I think he'll recover. A look of relief washed over Rowan's face, quickly replaced by his usual calm demeanor. Good. The pack needs him, I said quietly, and Ethan needs his father. The thought of Alaric becoming more involved in Ethan's life stirred a complex ache in my chest. Rowan met my gaze across the room. Ethan needs those who truly care for him, who see his worth beyond his bloodline. That's you, Sorrel. That will always be you. His words, spoken with such simple sincerity in the quiet of the room, stirred something deep inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to recognize what I had been feeling for months, a deep connection to this powerful, complex man who had shown me more respect and understanding than anyone from my human village ever had. Just then, Alaric stirred on the bed, bringing me back to the present. His golden eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain and confusion. Where? He rasped. You're home, I told him, checking his pulse. You were attacked, poisoned, but you're healing now. His gaze focused on me, recognition slowly dawning. The human healer, he whispered. Then seeing Rowan with Ethan, he relaxed. My son is safe, Rowan assured him, rising to bring Ethan closer. As is your pack. Rest now, cousin. Regain your strength. Alaric's eyes shifted between the three of us, Rowan, Ethan, and me, a strange expression crossing his face before he slipped back into a more peaceful sleep. That's a good sign, I said, relief flooding through me. His body is focusing on healing now, not fighting the poison. Rowan nodded and gently handed Ethan to me. Stay with them. I need to check the perimeter and meet with the guards. Before leaving, he paused beside me, his hand reaching up to caress my cheek. The touch was brief but deliberate, a silent promise of something to come when the crisis passed. Over the next week, Alaric's condition improved steadily. As he regained his strength, I watched him with Ethan. I noticed how his initial clinical detachment toward his son's disabilities had transformed into genuine interest. He began asking questions about Ethan's development, observing his attempts at movement, even holding him for short periods. "You've done well with him," Alaric admitted grudgingly one afternoon as I changed his bandages. "Better than—" he trailed off. "Better than you expected from a human." I finished, keeping my tone neutral. He glanced at me, slightly embarrassed. "Yes, I was wrong about that, yeah," he said, glancing toward the window where Ethan was playing on a blanket in the sunlight, Mara watching over him. "I was wrong about many things. It's not too late to be the father he deserves," I said as I secured a fresh bandage. Alaric studied me with those golden eyes so like his son's. "And where would that leave you, Sorrel Hawke? You've become his mother in all but blood." His words struck me with an unexpected depth and insight. Before I could respond, Rowan entered the room, his presence filling the space immediately. He nodded to his cousin before coming to stand beside me. "The rebels have been pushed back across the northern border," he reported. "Their forces were smaller than we feared, and their support among the packs was minimal." "Good news," Alaric said, trying to sit up straighter. "When will you return to the capital?" "Soon," Rowan replied. "Once you're well enough to resume leadership here. There's the solstice gathering to prepare for." Alaric's gaze shifted between us, a strange look crossing his face once again. "Yes, the solstice. A time for new beginnings." That evening, Rowan found me on the balcony of the guest quarters, watching as twilight settled over Stone Ridge. Ethan was already asleep inside, tired from a day of progress. He had stood unassisted for nearly 5 minutes that afternoon. "We'll leave in 2 days," Rowan said, coming to stand beside me. "Alaric is recovering well enough now." I nodded, my feelings mixed. The past week had been tense but rewarding, seeing how my healing knowledge had helped the pack and witnessing Alaric's grudging acceptance of his son. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Ethan, I mean." "Alaric has asked that Ethan remain with us at the capital," Rowan replied. "At least until he's older and stronger. He acknowledges that the care you provide is best for his development." Relief flooded me at the news that we wouldn't be separated. "And after that?" I asked, my heart racing at the thought of what might come next. "After that?" Rowan turned to face me, fully taking both my hands in his. "After that depends on decisions yet to be made, which brings me back to what I wanted to ask you on the ramparts before we were interrupted." My heart raced as he continued, his golden eyes locked on mine. "The solstice gathering isn't just a celebration or a political assembly. It's also when a king traditionally announces his choice of mate." He squeezed my hands gently. "I've spent years about unifying the packs through force when necessary and reform when possible. But there's been something missing. Balance, compassion to temper strength." "Rowan." I breathed, barely able to believe what he seemed to be suggesting. "You possess everything the future queen of the Lycans should embody," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Strength in gentleness, wisdom in healing, courage in the face of prejudice and danger." "But I'm human," I whispered. "An Omega." "You're Sorrel Hawke," he countered. "The woman who saved a royal pup when his own kind abandoned him. The woman who faced down alphas without flinching. The woman who healed not just Ethan, but Alaric, and perhaps me." He drew me closer, one hand slipping from mine to touch the silver pendant at my throat. This symbol of alliance between our kinds was a beginning. What I'm proposing is the fulfillment of that promise, human and Lycan joined, not just in alliance, but in something deeper. "Are you asking me to be your mate?" I asked, needing to hear the words directly. "I'm asking you to be my queen, my balance, my heart," he said simply. The words, though simple, were profound. To raise Ethan with me, to help heal the divisions between our kinds, to stand beside me as we create a world where no child is abandoned for being different. Tears blurred my vision as the full meaning of his proposal washed over me. This wasn't just about us. It was about transformation, about creating a new future from the broken pieces of the old. There will be opposition. He warned, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped. But I will stand with you. From the traditionalists within the packs and from humans who fear what we are, there's always resistance to change. But compassion in a cruel world isn't weakness. It's the greatest form of rebellion, I said, finding my voice at last. His smile, hearing my grandmother's words mirrored back at him, lit up his usually stoic face, turning it into something breathtaking. "Is that a yes, Sorrel Hawke?" he asked, his arms encircling my waist, pulling me close to the solid warmth of his chest. "Yes," I whispered, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the scar that marked him as a survivor, a warrior. "Yes to all of it." His kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then it deepened, igniting something powerful within both of us. Years of solitude and longing on each side surged between us, transforming into a bond so strong I felt it in every fiber of my being. I could almost feel the silver pendant at my throat pulse with energy, as if it had fused our worlds into one shared future. When we finally pulled away, both of us breathless, the stars were fully out, their light shining bright over Stone Ridge. From inside the room, a small sound broke the silence, Ethan waking, perhaps sensing the monumental shift that had just taken place. Rowan and I went to him, finding him standing in his crib, his golden eyes wide in the dim light. He reached out for both of us, one hand extended to each. No preference, no distinction between king and healer, Lycan and human. "Pack," he said clearly. His second word ever spoken, and it was perfectly chosen for the moment. "Yes, little one," I said, lifting him into our embrace, the three of us now united. "We are packed now." As I stood there with Ethan nestled between us, Rowan's arms encircling us both, I thought of the journey that had led me here. From outcast healer to future queen. From solitary wanderer to the heart of a family. The abandoned pup had brought me to my true home, and in saving him, I had found my own salvation. The moon rose over Stone Ridge, full and bright, casting its silver light on our three figures, no longer human, no longer Lycan. But something new, something stronger,